Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure, as always, to follow the Honourable Member for Ceredigion. Theresa May's disastrous handling of the Brexit negotiations is entirely of her own making. It is she who chose to interpret a narrow victory for Leave as meaning that the UK must exit the single market and the customs union. It is she who decided to call a general election in the middle of the most important negotiations in our post-war history, and is she who utterly failed to face down the hard core of English nationalists in her party who want Brexit at any cost. But in amongst all the chaos and incompetence, there is one aspect of her strategy that has become crystal clear. She has been talking up the prospect of no deal in order to bounce MPs from both sides of the House into supporting whatever deal she asks us to approve. Her game plan is simple: scare the living daylights out of Parliament by repeating ad nauseam that the choice will be between her deal and no deal at all. It is vital that Parliament rejects the Prime Minister's scaremongering and blackmail tactics, because they are built on an empty threat. The fact is that no deal is simply not going to happen, for three reasons. First, because a no-deal Brexit will unleash unmitigated chaos across government, business and society. As a member of the Select Committee on Exiting the European Union, I've heard extensive evidence from senior civil servants and business leaders about the extent to which our country is ready to absorb the shock of leaving the EU on the 29th of March 2019 without a deal.
Would you give me that?
I will give more. Yes.
Would you agree with me? But it's not simply leaving the European Union and relying on WTO or trade rules, but I mean, it means a rupture of a whole corpus of legal arrangements which have been in place for over 40 years. And such a scenario is totally unthinkable.
I thank my honourable friend and agree entirely. Let's not forget that this will impact on people's lives. Citizens' rights, the rights of EU citizens in the UK, British citizens in the European Union, the European arrest warrant, what will happen to that? What will happen to our entire place in terms of the security apparatus across the European Union? So it's not just about trade and the WTO, it's much bigger than that. I've been deeply impressed by the professionalism and dedication of every one of those who've come in to speak with us in the committee and give evidence. But the only conclusion that can be drawn is that they are engaged in a charade. Let's take the state of preparedness at our ports. John Thompson, the head of HMRC, told us that his French counterparts have categorically refused to engage in bilateral discussions about how to plan for a no-deal exit because bilateral contacts are not permitted under the terms of Article 50. So we can, of course, continue to allow goods from the EU in at Dover without checks, should we wish to do so, on the 30th of March. But we have absolutely no idea what the French are going to do at Calais in the event of no deal. Or our customs processes. Mr. Thompson told us there are currently 145,000 businesses across the UK who currently import or export their goods solely within the EU. Thanks to our membership of the Customs Union, not one of those businesses ever has to complete a customs declaration form, because all of the checks are done at the point of departure, i.e. at the relevant factories, warehouses and farms. If we exit without a deal, every one of those businesses that wishes to continue trading with the EU will need to know how to complete a range of complex customs declarations. But according to Mr. Thompson, to date only 2% of that 145,000 have contacted the HMRC to seek guidance on what they should do in the event of no deal. Or health. Sir Chris Wormold, Permanent Secretary at the Department of Health, told us that there is no clarity on reciprocal healthcare arrangements for UK citizens in the EU and EU citizens in the UK. This will end in the event of no deal. So whereas a British tourist in Paris needing medical treatment is currently entitled to full access to the French public healthcare system, as of 30th of March 2019, he or she may be required to hold a private insurance policy. Or legislation. Jill Rutter, Director of the Institute for Government, told us that in order to ensure that UK law is operable on the 30th of March 2019, in the event of no deal, a mountain of primary and secondary legislation would have to be passed. The government has so far managed to pass 6 of the 13 currently announced Brexit bills. Without a deal, it will need the trade bill to complete its passage through Parliament, along with other key bills in areas such as agriculture and fisheries, as well as legislation to secure EU citizens' rights. And then there's the mountain of secondary legislation, with between 800 and 1,000 statutory instruments having to be passed by the 29th of March. Even if MPs were to start working on all this primary and secondary legislation now, it would be a Herculean task. But as we're not even going to have the vote until the 15th or 16th of January, there is no sign at all of this being able to be brought forward, and we are in the realm of the impossible. I will give way.
I'm grateful to the honourable member for giving way. Does he fear there's also a significant risk that, just as they're trying to put unacceptable pressure on Parliament to accept a bad deal by holding up the threat of no deal, that as these major and often contentious pieces of legislation come through, that Parliament will be put under intense pressure to agree bad legislation without proper scrutiny, just because we've got to get something on the statute book in time?
I thank the honourable gentleman, and he's absolutely right, of course. This is a steamroller. The government's tactics and strategy are based on steamrolling, bullying, blackmail and holding a gun to Parliament's head. And the purpose of this debate today is to show that Parliament will not have it. We will not be bullied. We will not be presented with a false choice. We will not be blackmailed in the way that the government is trying to do. It is an outrage. It's a constitutional outrage and an outrage to our democracy. We have no idea how the EU27 would react to a no-deal exit, but draft legislation recently tabled by the French government contains this sentence: in case of withdrawal of the UK from the EU without agreement, British nationals and their family members currently residing in France would be staying illegally, thus leaving little room for doubt that what the mindset of the Member States' governments is, or about the profound challenges that would be created for the British government, citizens and businesses. And third, but not least, it is absolutely clear that there is no parliamentary majority for no deal. And it is equally clear that it is impossible that the government could consider a no-deal exit without the support of Parliament for such a course of action. So the conclusion is a no-deal Brexit is simply not on the cards, and a responsible government would be making that statement clearly today. As no deal is not going to happen, and given that the Prime Minister's deal is dead in the water, it is finally, I hope, becoming clear that there is an option that can bring Parliament together and get us through this difficult time. It's an option that I've been talking about for 2 years now, and many of my honourable friends and colleagues from across the House are sick to death of me banging the drum about it, but I am going to continue to do so. An EFTA EEA-based Brexit, combined with a customs union, otherwise known as the Norway Plus option, is the only option that resolves the Irish border issue, protects the jobs and livelihoods of the people we were elected to represent. It is the only option that I believe can command a cross-party parliamentary majority, and it is the only option that has a hope of reuniting our deeply divided country. So it is vital that Parliament holds its nerve. This is not a choice between the Prime Minister's deal and no deal, because no deal is simply not going to happen. This is a choice between the Prime Minister's deal and the right deal. This is a choice between caving into the Prime Minister's empty threats and scaremongering or standing up for the interests of our constituents. It's a choice between capitulating to a bully or asserting our sovereignty. I am confident when the time comes, Parliament will step up and will do what is right for the country.